Hello, welcome to Toxic. I'm Martin Rogers, here with Professor Tony Travers to discuss the race to be London Mayor. Welcome, Tony.
Hello.
So first of all, who are the runners and riders in the contest?
Well, the Labour Party have a list of six. They've got running David Lammy, Diane Abbott, Gareth Thomas, Sadiq Khan, Tessa Jowell and Christian Woolmar. So it's a list of six, and they've been off doing hustings around London, and it's a kind of interesting race, certainly particularly in contrast with the national leadership race, actually, rather more fit for purpose in its way.
Some have said that there's more talent in a way in the race to be London Mayor rather than in the race to be the leader of the Labour Party nationally. So why is that?
Well, there's no doubt that the national leadership context has ended up as a sort of an ideological struggle between the left, some would say the far left, and Blairites, and a kind of spectrum between, but a very wide ideological struggle. Whereas the London mayoral contest is much more contained, and it's really about who would be best candidate. Now, that's not to say there isn't a left-right split within these candidates. You've got Diane Abbott, who's a leading supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, who is clearly on the left. But then you've got Tessa Jowell, who's a super Blairite, representing that part of the party. And, between those, Gareth Thomas, who's a cooperative member, and so on. So there's quite a range of choice. And Christian Woolmar, of course, who's really a sort of new member of the party, or not a new member, but, new to politics. So quite a wide range of opportunity there.
So what about the Conservative Party? Who's likely to be their candidate? Who's making the running at the moment?
Well, the Conservatives have a leading candidate in rather the way that Tessa Jowell has been seen as the leading Labour candidate so far. But for the Conservatives, Zac Goldsmith, who's the MP for Richmond, leading candidate probably. But Stephen Greenhalgh, Deputy Mayor at City Hall at the moment, Saeed Kamal, an MEP, and Andrew Boff, an Assembly member. They're the Conservative shortlist.
So what about the candidates from the other parties?
Well, the Liberal Democrats, who really did badly last time in the mayoral race, they were squeezed by the race between Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson. They came fourth last time, behind the Greens. Caroline Pidgeon, probably their leading candidate. She's an Assembly member at present. For the Greens, their best-known candidate, probably Sean Berry, who's been very active in Green politics over a number of years. And beyond the major parties, you've got Respect standing a candidate, George Galloway, very much an individual personality all of his own. And then among the independents, Siobhan Benita, who stood last time and caused a bit of a stir last time by managing to press herself into the contest and get an independent voice. And so she'll be standing again.
So what are the issues that are likely to be definitive in the race, maybe for the candidates, but also for the race for City Hall?
I mean, preeminently this time, the issue is housing. It's interesting that if you look back into London politics 10, 20 years ago, certainly in the early days of the mayoralty, in the run-up to 2000, transport was the main issue. But now it's housing. Population of the city is growing at the rate of 110, 120,000 a year. Number of housing units, homes that are being built, 20 to 25,000. So there's a huge gap there every year. So what we're hearing from candidates, Conservative and Labour, is that London needs more housing, with big commitments being made to get housing numbers up to 50,000 a year, which will require a huge change. So it's housing number one. Transport's still there number two. Should London get another Crossrail line once the first one is completed, extending the Bakerloo line and so on. Future of the night tube, very much in the news recently, and so on. All of those things will be debated. And then there's plenty of other things for the mayor to do, but it's going to be housing and transport number one and two issues.
But what is actually within the remit of the mayor to change? Is that likely to change in itself?
Well, it's true, the mayor doesn't build housing. The mayor operates through the boroughs and housing associations, and of course there's separately a challenge to the housing associations because of the government's decision to operate a sort of right-to-buy policy there. So there's some uncertainty there. But what the mayor has to do is to encourage the boroughs to give more planning permissions, to try to stimulate the market, to get more house builders into building in the city, and just to keep the whole system motoring along. I mean, it's not easy. You have to say this for Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson. They found it difficult getting even 25,000 homes built a year. So that isn't quite within the mayor's ambit. But what is transport, of course. Transport is, tubes, buses, major roads and so on, all within the mayor's control. But then the issue is, can they get money out of the Chancellor? Because for any big new schemes, you have to get either the Chancellor's money and or the Chancellor's agreement to go ahead with the project.
So we're seeing increasing talk about devolution, whilst London is being described as a city-state. So is this race and perhaps the change in profile of London politics likely to have an effect on the rest of the country more widely?
I mean, London does have its own government within England, and of course separately to the London mayoral race we've got another big political issue that we've discussed before in the hot seat, devolution across the UK, but including within England. So in some ways London is already a city region with some element of devolution. Question, should it go further? Now, many of the candidates in the mayoral race are saying yes, they want more financial power, more service power. So I think it will be an issue in the mayoral race. It will put pressure back on national government. And of course, this is all also against the background of what's going on in Greater Manchester, where the city region there, the 10 districts there, have signed a deal with George Osborne about some devolution of power to that area. So Manchester and London will probably move together on this over time, and certainly you'd expect the London mayoral candidates to be arguing for, if not a city-state, but greater powers for London.
Now, at the risk of asking you to make a prediction, what is likely, what are the current sort of positions of the parties?
I think what's really interesting is that the polling has shown so far that Tessa Jowell is the leading candidate for Labour, and that Zac Goldsmith, the leading candidate for the Conservatives. But of course, Tessa Jowell and the Labour Party, their contest is all going on against the backdrop of the extraordinary Labour leadership campaign. And we can never be sure that some of what's going on in the national leadership campaign and debates won't spill over into London. So perhaps it'll be a more open race in London than was at first suggested, and certainly Joe Murphy, writing in the Evening Standard, has suggested that might be the case. I think beyond that, for the Conservatives, Zac Goldsmith looks most likely to be the candidate. And of course then the question is, will he, as a sort of moderate, green-tinged Conservative, come across as perhaps slightly more in favour of protecting the city and anti-Heathrow and all of these things, while the Labour Party is pro-big infrastructure. So, we could see some slight realignment even within London politics, not just on a straightforward left-right spectrum.
In a way, is Zac Goldsmith quite a good candidate for this post, in the similar way that Johnson was, in that obviously on the metropolitan wing, but with some unusual interest for a Conservative candidate, like you say, being slightly green-tinged?
Well, I mean, he's a remarkable candidate in many ways, because he's the son of Sir James Goldsmith, notoriously anti-European, but Zac Goldsmith himself is famously a Green, and there's a very real chance that as a sincere Green candidate in an election where there are second preference votes, that he could easily mop up lots of second preference votes from Greens and Liberal Democrats that could be vital. So Labour's going to have to think long and hard about how they combat an independent-minded candidate like Zac Goldsmith.
Great, thank you very much, Tony. You're off the hot seat.
Thank you.